And I'm connected.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Smack Talk Live. I'm Coach along with Lone Wolf, and we're gonna mainly focus on the NBA tonight. Lone Wolf, I believe, correct?
Yes, indeed. I did quite a bit of research for this show tonight. I'm very prepared and very ready to talk about the NBA.
All right. Well, then we'll get going. I did want to, bring up the lottery was tonight,
Oh
and
yes.
the Minnesota Timberwolves have won the number one draft pick. Um, so we'll see if they can finally get that thing turned around. Um, not sure if they'll be able to. They just never seem to really get it going there over there in the Twin Cities.
No, and they really don't. I mean, it's been so long since the Kevin Garnett years, and they've had some opportunities. They've brought in some young talent, but they can't quite figure it out. They can't quite get there, and they've not really been good for a long time, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, maybe they bring in another young piece, and this is where they figure that out. I don't know.
Right. And the thing is that they've had some talented players.
They have. Oh, definitely. Yeah, they have. And um, like I said, they've tried
Can you hear me?
to recreate. Yeah, I can still hear you. Yep. You still
Can you
there,
hear
Coach?
me?
Yep. You good?
Oh, jeez. Can you hear me, Lone Wolf?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
can.
got you, Coach.
Okay, yeah. My headset's acting up, so I had to quick switch back over to the just the regular computer mic
Oh, okay.
speakers. So I'm not sure what's going on with it. I don't know. So,
Okay.
anyways, yeah, the Timberwolves have had some talented guys, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just the organization isn't very good or what the deal is, but um, they just can't seem to get it going. So, um, I guess we'll see what happens as we move forward with that. Um, you know, I wanted before we get into like the playoffs and the things we're
Yeah.
going to talk about, the NBA draft. Yeah, and
Mhm.
it there always seems to be controversy on whether this is a good way to decide your draft order. What are your thoughts on the lottery itself?
You know, I kind of feel like it's not. I mean, there are times in the lottery when a team will win and you look at it and you say, is it really fair for that team to have won the lottery? Because there's so many teams that are eligible. Now, this year, the T Wolves won it. They're not the worst team in the league, but they're close to the worst team in the league. So, could they use it? Yeah. But it doesn't do the football, right? It doesn't do the football reverse order where the worst team is guaranteed to get that number one pick. So I remember years where, and this is an old example, but you know, the Orlando Magic, they were like 40 and 42 or something, and they got the first pick in the draft because they were still in the lottery. The NBA has the possibility of doing something like that. Now, I don't know if they've changed it since then. I think they've modified it, but nevertheless, you have teams who are eligible for the lottery who aren't really that bad, and they could win the first pick. And granted, the percentage is probably lower, but I'm not a huge fan. I don't necessarily like that. I mean, you have to strategize as a GM to be able to get ready for the following year, and you should know you win more games. That's your strategy. You have to prepare based on how your team does, and you go from there. I kind of feel like maybe the football, the order in kind of like what football does would be better than what the NBA does, because I just don't like the fact that a team who is actually not that bad could potentially get a really, really high draft pick, and that would make them that much better. And maybe that's the nature of basketball. I don't know. I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a huge fan of that. I don't know what you think, Coach, but I'm not a huge fan of that.
No, I absolutely agree. I don't like it. You know, you can people say, well, it keeps teams from tanking. No, it doesn't. They just tank even
No.
harder to try to have a higher percentage
Right.
um, of getting that first overall pick. You, the whole point of a draft is to have those struggling teams be able to become competitive because the NFL has shown it. When you have most of your teams still in the playoff hunt come the end of your regular season, your ratings are higher. You have more fans engaged. There's more excitement. When you get to the All-Star weekend, you have a quarter of your league is basically out of it.
Mm-hmm.
You've lost those fans. Um,
Yeah.
so
Definitely.
I don't like it. I just pulled up, some of the biggest surprises, that the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2014, a 1.7% chance. Um,
Yeah.
2008 Bulls, 1.7. 2011 Cavaliers, 2.8. Then they even had the lowest percentage in 1999. The Charlotte Hornets had a 0.73% chance,
Mm-hmm.
and they got the third pick. It's just it's like when you're that close to being a playoff team, you shouldn't be rewarded with a really high draft pick.
Right.
Uh,
Right. And that was my point with the Magic too. I mean that's exactly it. You shouldn't
yeah,
be. I mean that's not how this really should play out, because then that team will become very competitive and very good very quickly, which I get. Maybe the NBA wants that. I don't know. And that's kind of what I was saying. Like, the NBA is different than the NFL in that regard. But at the same time, um, yeah, you shouldn't have a season that's right above 500 to where you are rewarded with a number one or number two pick or something like that. That's just not how that works. It shouldn't work that way.
right, exactly. So, but that I just don't know if I don't see the NBA
Changing it,
changing.
yeah.
Um, which I think they like the whole unknowing, and they make an event of it. But again, you look at it, and those teams that um, are struggling, that feel that they should get those picks, they
Mm-hmm.
don't. Now, you look at this year, the Warriors had the worst record. Well, there's a reason for
Right.
that. Are they the worst team in the league? No.
No,
Um,
not even remotely. Yeah.
I mean, they are going to get a great player because they got the second overall pick. Now,
Which
they're
I
kind
think
of
is one of the most intriguing storylines of the whole thing, really. I mean, for them to get the number two pick, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now I could see them instead of taking a player because they're in a win now mode. Um, I could see them trading that for a player. Um, you
Right.
know, so we'll see. We'll see. What happens. Um,
Well, and honestly, I put together my, not to reveal anything for later in the show, but I mean, we talked about doing a top five in terms of trades. I put that together without looking at the draft order from the lottery. So, um, you know, that could change things. I mean, Golden State is in a position where, like you said, now that they have the number two pick, they may look at it and say, well, as long as our stars are healthy, let's trade that. Let's drop back in the first round, or let's get out of the first round and draft somebody later and pick up a player by trading this pick. And that could change some of the dynamics. It's a possibility they could get somebody that's really good to complement some of their other star players.
right, exactly. We'll go through, our you know, our top five trades we'd like to see. Mine's gonna look a little bit different because I had didn't have as much time to prep just because I had meetings all day for the upcoming school year. So,
Yeah.
but I'm sure we'll have some good discussion here
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
So, shifting away from the lottery, let's head to the playoffs. We are now in round one of the playoffs, and it's pretty interesting so far.
Yeah.
The Bucks lost to the Magic in game one. Um, they won today, so the series is tied at one. You have the Clippers losing today versus the yesterday to the Mavericks. That series is 1-1. You had the Lakers lose to the Trailblazers in game one. They're
Right.
up big tonight. Um, so you have some of these higher seeds that have struggled. So
Yeah.
you look at it
Yeah.
and it's like, is it one of those things where the these top teams are struggling and could get upset, or is it just they kind of went into the seeding games kind of laissez-faire, and now it's going to take a couple of games for them to actually like wake up? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, the Lakers and the Bucks both have under impressed me so far, if that's even a word. In the first, well, I shouldn't even say in the playoffs, just in general, they both have come out in these games and then in these playoff series a little sluggish. But what I anticipate is both of them will win their opening series. Now, I will say this: the Magic don't have enough to do damage to the Bucks to win this series. Bottom line. All right. And if the Bucks lose, it's a travesty. But Portland has been surging, and if they were to lose, the Lakers were to lose to Portland, I I think that it would be less of a horrible event, or it would be less tragic than if the Bucks were to lose to the Magic, because they have a bona fide star, and Portland isn't as bad to me. But Portland's a better team than Orlando, but it would still be bad in terms of losing in that first round. If you're the Lakers, you're really expected to win, and I think both teams will. It's just going to be a bumpy road. My thought is that these teams will get past this initial hurdle. But beyond that, I don't know. I mean, if they don't figure it out quickly, they're going to run into a team in the playoffs who has figured it out, who's a better seed, who's a better team, and is going to knock them off. And that would, greatly throw our whole playoff predictions into flux. But
Well,
I
what?
will tell you this though. I will tell you this: the Mavs are the real deal, and they could definitely knock off the Clippers in this series. They are clicking on all cylinders. I love their offense. They're not bad defensively. They could get better, but they could knock off the Clippers because the Clippers just don't look. They don't look like they're in sync right now.
No,
They don't.
and I don't think they've ever really been in sync.
Yeah.
All the talk about how good they were going to be, that they're going to be the next kind of Golden State Warriors. It's like I never bought it, to be honest. Um, you can throw a bunch of stars together, but unless they form a chemistry, it's not going to work. I mean, the reason the Heat were so good when you had, LeBron and Wade and Bosh were they had chemistry. That's why they were good, not because they
Yeah.
had stars. Um, yeah, they were really good, individual players, but they meshed well together.
and
And I
and
think
they chose each other too, right? Like, I mean, they came together on purpose, and they knew they would have chemistry and coming together in Miami.
right. And my other thing is, you know, and I know what he did in Boston, but I don't think Doc Rivers is a great head coach, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, Danny Ainge basically handed him an all-star roster
yeah,
and said, "You need to win a championship,
right,
and don't get in their way."
right,
And they were able to do that.
yeah.
Um, I don't think he can do the same thing in LA. Um, I think if they were going to do it, they needed to do it before Anthony Davis got to the Lakers because
Right.
you had that fan base shifted to a Clippers
You did. You really did. Yes.
because the Lakers were so bad.
Yep.
Um,
You had your
now,
chance.
now that they're basically back, the Clippers are gonna be an afterthought, and that can affect a team. Believe it or not,
Yep.
if you
Yep.
don't have a strong fan base, that can
Yep.
definitely affect the team.
Even with a Kawhi Leonard, who, I mean,
Right.
well, here's the thing, right? Okay, so the NBA is interesting because it isn't that much different from other leagues in terms of certain cities or certain venues having preference over others. And you hit on that just now with the whole Lakers thing. Kawhi Leonard, and they go out with the Toronto Raptors, and he left San Antonio, and they win a title, but they just people don't necessarily pay as close attention to that if it's not a certain franchise. So I mean, the Lakers win a title, everybody in the universe knows about it. The Raptors win a title, people know about it, but 80 million people don't know about it as opposed to 15 million people or whatever. I'm just making up a number. The point is that it's just not as thought of. So yes, exactly. The Lakers are good. The Clippers are an afterthought. It definitely has a bearing on how those teams play. No matter what the players or the coach or anybody says, it's definitely impactful. And the West is just so loaded. I
Yeah,
mean, the Mavs are a 7 seed. They're good.
yeah,
So
yeah. You put a couple of those lower Western Conference teams in the Eastern Conference, and they're probably in the upper half of the conference.
yeah,
You look at the Sixers, where they are at, but that was a lot to do with what they did earlier in the season. Towards the shutdown, and since they came back, they have not been the same team.
right.
Um, you know, I'd take the Mavericks over the Magic, over the Sixers, over the Heat or the Pacers. Um,
Yes.
you know,
All of the above.
you just keep looking at the Eastern Conference teams, and you're like, yeah, okay, they're in the playoffs and stuff, but you just don't have a lot of confidence in them.
No.
Because the Eastern Conference, you know, isn't that good. And you look at the Raptors. Yeah, you're the defending champs. Game one, you handled the Nets, but now
Yep.
game two, it was pretty close.
Right.
The 5 point game, and I'm sorry, the Nets aren't that good.
No.
So it's going to be really, really interesting as these series continue to move forward. Um, you know, I'm most wondering if the lack of fans is affecting the top teams. Because
Mhm.
like Giannis, he feeds off the crowd. He's
Right.
always fed off the crowd. Especially at home games, he's almost unstoppable. When they
Yeah.
play in Milwaukee, you're not going to have that. Um, you know, um, and we'll bring that up, bring kind of some of the fan stuff up towards the end, end of the show. There's a couple things I want to touch on, um, you know, but you just wonder how much of an impact that it has made on a team like the Bucks and the Lakers, that feed off of a lot of emotion, compared to like a
Yep.
team like the Mavericks, who are just, they're kind of like the blue collar guy that goes to work, eats his PB&J sandwich out of his lunchbox, and goes back to work. They're that kind of team.
Right.
Um, they're not good. They're not flashy. They just go to work and get it done. Um, so, what do you think about that? Am I off base on that, or could that actually be playing into some of the struggles of these top tier teams?
No, I don't think you're off base. I mean, I think that there are certain teams who feed more off the fans maybe than others, and the NBA and basketball in general is just a fan driven sport. Like it's such a game of momentum. So to have the fans in the stands and cheering one way or the other makes a huge difference. But I agree. I mean, I think that there are certain teams, and yeah, Milwaukee is a great example. We're Milwaukee fans, so seeing Giannis, he does feed off the crowd. That team does feed off the crowd, and really, it plays more as a team than some others. There are some that are star driven, and maybe they don't quite play as a team as much. Like Houston comes to mind. I mean, they're a good team, but James Harden is like the fuel and the fire for that particular team. So Milwaukee, to me, while they have Giannis, they play better as a team overall, and I definitely think they do feed off the fans. I don't know, that could be part of it. This has been an adjustment for everybody in the NBA, and so you could say, well, it's not fair. You're making an undue comparison because all teams are dealing with this, but each team is different. So I do agree. I think there's some merit to what you're saying there, Coach.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's especially, you look at the complexities of like the NBA, the NHL, where the fans are like right on you.
Yeah,
It's close. It's not like the NFL, where I don't
right.
think
They're removed.
you
Yeah.
will, having fans or not having fans. I don't think that will really affect the players as much. Um, as the NBA and the NHL, because you have a much smaller arena. You have a lot of noise and people right there to help feed on that emotion.
Yeah, they're
Um,
right up next to you.
yeah,
Anybody that's ever been to an NFL game, yeah, you can get row one seats or whatever, but you're not really row one. You're not next
right,
to the players. You never are. Whereas if
right.
you're an NBA and an NBA game, I've sat courtside at an NBA game. You're right there. I mean, the players are landing in your lap, literally.
Well,
That's not
exactly.
in the NFL. Yeah.
Right. You have player fan interaction throughout the entire game in the
Right.
NBA. In the NFL, it's only when there's a touchdown or
Yeah.
a big splash play. That's it.
Yeah.
You don't see somebody making a tackle for a gain of three, running up to the crowd and high fiving the crowd. You just it
Right.
does
Yeah. No, it doesn't
you know.
happen. Yeah.
So I really think that we don't really talk about it. We're just happy that there's games being played,
Right.
but I really think not having fans there are impacting some of these top tier teams.
I think so. Yeah. It's a psychological thing, but yeah, it's definitely there. I agree. I mean, like I said, basketball is a game of momentum and emotion, and for some teams, it makes more of a difference than others, but it's definitely impactful. I won't discount that at all.
All right, so we kind of reviewed the series and some of the teams. One series I think that's going to be interesting to watch are the Nuggets and the Jazz. So I think
Yeah.
both teams they're they're good and they're kind of teetering because their stars are coming up for either free agency or you need to sign them.
Right.
And so they're kind of on that teeter totter is are they could either go continue to ascend or they could go back to rebuild,
Right.
depending on how their future goes. And that's going to be a pretty balanced series, I think, throughout.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the Nuggets, and I'll tell you what, if the Mavericks upend the Clippers and the Trailblazers at least give the Lakers a series and put some more miles on LeBron James than the Lakers really want to, you never know. We could see a Mavericks Nuggets Western Conference Finals, um, which would be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Western Conference is so loaded with good teams that you have the possibility of having those other teams. If the Lakers slip up, it's anybody's game.
Yeah,
Um, I I personally like the Jazz a little bit more. Donovan Mitchell has really impressed me, and I really like his game, and I like what they bring to the table. So, but I wouldn't discount the Nuggets either. It's like a 55-45 proposition to me.
yeah,
Either way that series could go, and those teams are both capable of making it to the finals, the Western Conference Finals, and then if the Lakers are there, would they beat them? Or if the Lakers aren't there, then the door is wide open, and then then we have a lot to talk about. So
right.
yeah, I agree. I think it'd be fun.
And that's the thing. If the Lakers and or the Bucks would get eliminated
Right.
before before the conference finals, it is anybody's game.
Yeah.
Uh, After that, especially just seeing, and I know the Lakers and the Bucks didn't really play well in their seeding games, but the Clippers just looked like they
Flawed.
were like
Yeah.
zombified. Um, they just really didn't do much to give me a lot of encouragement that they could, they'd easily be the team to go to the finals if the Lakers were to lose.
Right.
So
I agree with you. They did not. And I will say this. I mean, I think if if the top seeds lose, to me in the Eastern Conference, it's a little bit more solidified than in the Western Conference. And yes, Toronto fans, I'm going to disrespect you. I know you won it last year, but you don't have Kawhi anymore. Uh, to me, the the Celtics would be the
Yeah.
clear favorite if the Bucks lose.
And
That would,
I
to me, that's what it'd be.
was saying the same thing. But here's the thing, and I'm looking at, just thinking back to the last two seasons. You know, the Bucks had kind of cruised through the early playoff series the last couple of years.
Yes. Yep.
And when they got into those kind of dogfight series, they struggled, you
Yeah.
know. So I think losing a game here and there in the early rounds is
It's
going to be
good.
good for them.
Yeah.
Um, Unlike the Celtics, where you're playing a Sixers team that is decimated with injury, they aren't playing well.
Right. They should be
They're,
better than they are, but they're
yeah,
really playing badly. Yeah. Poorly.
there's
Yeah.
probably going to be a ton of roster changes this offseason for them.
Right.
Um, so you're going to go on, probably winning four there, unless
Yeah.
they take it easy one of these first four games. But they have to be careful because again, there could be kind of like the Bucks were the last couple of years, where it's just hey, we won 4-0, we won 4-0. Oh crap! All of a sudden now we're down 2-1. Now we got to win three of our
Yeah.
out of the
Yeah.
last four. So I think it'll be good for the Bucks that that the Magic did win a game. Hopefully, it woke them up.
I hope so. Yeah. Yeah. From a
Um,
fan perspective, obviously.
right.
Yeah.
Well, in today, they won by 15. That's
Sure.
a decent win.
Yeah.
Uh, so we'll see. They play again on Saturday. That they need to win that game. Um, and
Yeah. Most
I
definitely.
think if they do that, then I think it'll be maybe a five game series, maybe a 6 game series. It won't go seven though. If the Bucks
No.
can win handily on Saturday. Let's see. I'm trying to think anything else here with the playoffs that really have, you know.
No, I mean, the only series we didn't really talk about, I will say, is Houston versus OKC. Um, I mean, I like Houston in that series. I think OKC is one of those teams that they're kind of riding out the remainder of what they had,
Mhm.
and it's they're good, but they're not there, and they're going to be in a mode next year where they're probably rebuilding a little bit. So I kind of feel like Houston will win that series, and then we'll see what happens in terms of the Western Conference. Again, I won't discount Houston completely. They're good. I don't think they have enough to make it to the NBA finals out of the Western Conference. So
Yeah, I just don't think. Yeah, I just don't think the Rockets have enough depth
right.
throughout their entire roster to be able to compete with like the Lakers or the Clippers. Now, Lakers Clippers get upended again. Now you put Houston
Who
in play.
knows? Right. Yeah.
Now you put Houston in play. Um, but again,
Denver, Utah, whoever. Yeah. Yeah.
right, like you said, Thunder. This is probably it for them for a couple of
Their
years.
last hurrah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think they really mismanaged that roster quite a bit.
Right.
With some ill-advised trades. You just
It kind of felt to me like they had a group there that was working, and then they squandered that because you had a Harden there, you had Russell Westbrook, and you had Kevin Durant, and you had these
Mhm.
stars, and you had Serge Ibaka, and you had these guys, but each time it was like, well, lose a piece, and that person leaves and goes off here, and that person goes off and goes here, and like Serge Ibaka and James Harden, these guys left, and James Harden wasn't the primary guy on that squad when he left. Don't get me wrong, but then they were like, oh, well, we'll just get Paul George, or we're going to go out, we'll get Chris Paul. And, the dynamic of your team is completely different. Those guys are not the same players. So it was like this plug and play, will
Yeah,
still be good. It didn't quite work.
right. And that's the thing, once they started losing guys and then tried to kind of patchwork things together, they started to decline quite a bit. Um, and granted that they did something that I don't think many of us thought they would be able to do, and that's be competitive from moving from Seattle to Oklahoma City. But they
Right.
were, and hey, they made the playoffs. But sorry, OKC fans, this is you're probably not going to make it next year because I'll tell you right now, there's a team that I think is on the uptick that did not make the playoffs this year. That's gonna make a jump next year, and then you're gonna have the Warriors that are at least back, towards the top of the Western Conference. Maybe not what they were, but they'll be back in the hunt next year.
Right.
So, um, and unless they go and can, sign a free agent and improve that roster, I don't see them being a playoff contender next year. So,
Right. I
um,
agree. I think so. Yeah. Yep.
let's see. So that's it for the NBA playoffs. Just real quick, we might as well bring it up the NHL playoffs. They're still going strong. The Las Vegas Golden Knights knocked off the Blackhawks to advance.
It's your team.
Um, yep. So both my teams played, so I knew I was gonna have at least one team moving on. Um, but again, I think the actual playoffs, I think, is kind of getting overshadowed with the fact that they have not had any issues with COVID.
Zero
Zero,
issues.
zero issues with COVID this entire time.
It's
Either
been
that,
amazing.
either that, or they're just not reporting it. One of the two.
They've been lying about him the whole time. Yeah.
Which I don't think they'd be able to do,
No, I
but
don't think so.
but um, but yeah. So it's still they're still finishing up some round one series. Yeah, you have a game. It looks like it'll be a game six versus the Canadians and Flyers. Um, then there's a game six against the Stars and Flames tonight.
Right.
There'll be game six versus the Canucks and the Blues.
Yep.
So there's still some series going on. So it's been
Yeah.
good hockey. It hasn't
I-
been
It hasn't
horrible.
been bad at all. No, I agree. It's been really great. You know what surprised me a little bit, and I don't follow the NHL as closely as some, but I will say the Islanders and the Capitals surprised me a little bit because I thought the Capitals were a little bit better than the 4-1, that the 4-1 series they lost 4-1. I was a little surprised by that. And maybe I'm wrong, but I thought the Capitals were just a little bit better than that. This is a team that they had won the NHL Stanley Cup. Um, I guess maybe I just thought that they would be more competitive in that series. So
Yeah, yeah, that was surprising. Um, you know, it's going to be interesting the next round because you're going to get some pretty good matchups there once it's all
yeah,
said and done. Um, I and again they're one of my top teams, but I just really think Las Vegas has a really great shot this year. They were so close last year,
they really were.
and that'd be amazing to see an expansion team in only the second year of existence winning a world championship like that. So
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see. We'd probably never see anything like that again in our lifetime, anyways. So, um, so I think that'd be fun to see. Um, so that's the NHL. Um, baseball still plugging away. Nothing too too exciting to report there.
No, not really.
Again, it's funny. We talked about how the shortened season might help out interest in baseball, but it really hasn't. You know,
Well, and they lost their traction with a lot of the COVID issues they had right away with the season and all these games getting canceled. It kind of stole their thunder. You know what I mean? Like it just ripped it right out of there. And I think there was some interest, but then all of a sudden it was like, well, this game's canceled, that game's canceled. Oh, now 30 games have been canceled, or 40 games, or however many games have been canceled because of the issues that they've had health wise. So yeah, I thought you're right. I thought that was what we would see, but they just haven't had that.
right? So we'll see. We'll see. What the Major League Baseball can do. Um, Real quick, NFL, training camps are still going on. And I just pulled this stuff up and I did not know this. This must have just been reported. I think he's a decent coach. He's just on a really, he's a coach of a really bad organization right now. Um, Ron Rivera was diagnosed
Oh
with cancer.
wow. Yeah,
Uh,
I'm looking at that. Yeah, 1 hour ago that just came out.
so
Okay.
thoughts and prayers go out to him. Hopefully, they caught it early enough that he can make a speedy recovery from that. Again, we talk about um, players and in the games or anything, but you got to remember there's more to this than just football.
Right.
These are lives and are impacted just as much. So, again, thoughts and prayers go out to Ron Rivera on his now fight with cancer. I'm assuming he knew probably well before this was announced.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to the public. Um,
Well,
so
and this reminds me a little bit of the Chuck Pagano
yeah,
situation. I don't know what Ron Rivera's cancer is. If it's he says it's very treatable, so I'm assuming it's not a pancreatic cancer or something. I didn't read an article about it, but I agree. I mean, these are people, and I love to see when the team rallies around the coach who has that. That's what the Chuck Pagano. That's what happened with his situation when he was the coach and when he was the head coach, I should say. And so Ron Rivera, same thing. I mean, it's hopefully he does have it. That is very treatable, um, and he's doing well, or he ends up doing well as a result. But yeah, definitely great guy. I don't think they're going to be a very good team, but again, this is the human aspect of it. Great
yeah.
guy, so hopefully he does well with that. I really do.
And then just some other quick news. Des Bryant had a workout with the Ravens. I don't know why you'd touch him, to be honest. Um, and then just real quick, more absurdity from NFL going way overboard on everything social going on. The Chiefs are not going to allow their fans to wear headdresses or paint their faces um, in the
Oh boy,
style of Chiefs anymore. I, I,
why not? Why not? Right, Coach? Why not?
I, it doesn't surprise
You
me.
laugh about it. I mean,
It
it's ridiculous.
doesn't surprise me. But here's the thing:
No,
if you say if you're saying that's offensive, change your name then. Go all the
Right.
way, change your name then. If
Right.
you're going to do this to the fans and not allow them to come into the stadium like that, then change your name.
Yeah.
If it's that offensive, change your name. Uh, I just I just read that too just before the show started, and I was like, you gotta be kidding me, you
It's
know?
the latest in things, and it's probably going to be one of those things that isn't going to stop. Like this thing just keeps kind of going, and people are like, oh, change this name, change that name. Okay, look, I mean, the Redskins changed their name because there was pressure from a lot of groups, and there has been for years about them changing their name. I don't know that the Chiefs is offensive necessarily, and maybe it is to some people, but it's a name that's you're a chief, you're a leader of your
Right,
particular tribe, or uh, so I don't know, and maybe that's an ignorant view, but I don't really think so. I don't think it's offensive, but um, there are fans who do things that are ridiculous, no matter whether they're a fan of that team or any other team. Fans show up and they're dressed ridiculously for a wide variety of reasons that are offensive to people, even if your team is like the Bears or the Lions or
right,
something, where you think, oh, that can't be offensive. Well, I'm sorry to say, but I've been to plenty of NFL games. There are people who are dressed up that are offensive, and it isn't just racially motivated, so
right,
or ethnically motivated. So yeah. I mean, it goes to a certain point where you just say, what are you adjudicating here?
right,
What are you looking to get out of the game? So
right. So, then the last thing I want to touch on with the NFL before we get to our two fun topics that
yeah.
we're and then go back to the NBA with that is the NFL is talking about the possibility of having a fan noise policy at games this year. So, and I read a little bit about it. So it sounds like, most places, most teams are at least going a couple of weeks without fans in the stands. So from what it sounds like, they're talking about having a policy where the home team can bring in artificial fan noise like they do at practices during games.
Hmm.
I, I can understand it, but at the same time, I don't see what the benefit of that would be.
So this is just for practices where they're bringing in fan noise because um
It'd be for games, I believe,
oh
from
okay.
my reading. So they'd be able to bring in that
Oh,
artificial
so there's
noise.
no fans at games, and so then they bring in fan noise because there's no fans there. That kind of thing.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay.
You know,
I mean, this is kind of akin to the fans in seats that are watching the games. So I was watching Clippers Mavs game 1 the other day, and I'm like, what is going on in the stands? And it was just distracting to me because they had a bunch of simulated virtual
yeah,
fans. It just
yep,
bothered me. I was like, this is bothering me. I don't like it. It would kind of feel the same way in the fact that I would know that there would be no fans in the stands at all for these games. Yet there's all of these people cheering or leering or whatever they're doing. It would bug me. I don't know. I'm not a huge proponent of that. I really am not.
right. And neither am I. It's like if you're not going to have fans, don't have fans.
Yeah,
If you want fan noise, then let fans in.
yeah. Well,
So,
and teams, here's the thing, right? So teams have to deal with fan noise if they go somewhere. So if they are in Seattle, for example, and they're like, oh, it's the 12th man or whatever, or you go to Minnesota, which I'm sorry, but that stadium is obnoxiously loud if you're in it. Um,
mhm,
you have to deal with that as a team. So if there are no fans, hey, guess what? Now all these teams have to deal with the silence.
Right.
And that's a little unnerving for them, but they're going to have to deal with it. And who deals with it a little bit better may end up making a difference in terms of who may execute better and who may win the game.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's it's just a new challenge, for teams to prepare for is the
Right.
silence. Um, because now the other team can hear everything that's going on in your huddle, or hear players calling out things very clearly. So it's just a new thing that teams have to look at and prepare for.
Right. Right.
um that's how I look at it. I mean, we just found out this week we are playing our fall season. I know, our state's kind of a little different. You got half playing in the spring, and then, we're playing in the fall. We're good to go with
Okay.
game, and it can only be immediate family in the stands. So,
Okay.
we're probably going to
Right.
have maybe 40 people at our games. Then it's going to be different. It's
Sure.
just the way it is. So, it's just
You have
something
to
as
adapt to it.
right as a coach and a player, you have to adapt to the circumstances and not try to make it artificial. Because, like you said, it's distracting. If you're watching, it's distracting. It's like watching some clips like of the baseball stuff with the virtual artificial fans in the stands. I was just like, what? This is like a bad video game.
That's what it felt like. Exactly. It
You
was almost,
know?
it was, well, it wasn't Tecmo Bowl because the fans there are clearly not, people, but yeah, it felt like that. It felt like that. Yeah.
So
It was weird.
So we'll see what happens with that with the NFL. But um, you know, I think there's other things there that they need to be more concerned about.
Right.
Uh, I personally
Like how
think
they're
that,
actually going to play their games and where they're going to play their games.
well, that, and I really think some of the decisions that they have made that are not football related are really going to affect viewership.
Yeah.
I really think they're they've made some decisions that are going to hurt their brand with a big segment of their fans.
Yeah.
So we'll we'll see how that all you know goes
Plays
down.
out. Yeah. Yep.
So let's move on. Let's move on to our. We'll start with our top five, and then we'll do your last.
Okay.
Your idea that
My
came up,
question. Yeah. Yeah.
because I think that you could be pretty interesting to see who we would each pick there.
Shoes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, looking, and to be honest, I don't follow the NBA very much. I know
Hmm.
kind of what's going on, things like
Right.
that. So I'm not as versed in what teams need, things like that. So I'm going with just the player that
Okay.
should be created. I don't have a team in mind. I just think they'd be good for both the team that they're leaving and the player for them to go somewhere else.
Sure. Sure.
So
And hey, you know
uh,
what? Sometimes that's all it takes. I mean, yes, a landing spot is good, but sometimes it's just that player needs to get out of that city, get out of that situation, and move on. So,
exactly. So my number five, and I think a lot of people will agree that this player should be traded. He probably will be traded.
yeah,
I'll be shocked if he kind of isn't, because there was talks about him being traded this past year, and that is Chris Paul
yeah,
um,
yeah,
getting traded from Oklahoma City. They needed to basically start the rebuilding process, and it starts with trading Chris Paul, getting something in return for him, unloading that contract, um, and starting fresh. And because he is really is the last piece there, um, that from their runs. It's time to just say, you know what, we can't just hold on and be a lower level playoff team. We need to just rebuild and move on from Chris Paul.
Right. And I agree with you. Actually, it's weird how these things work out because I agree. This is my number 5 as well. It's Chris Paul. Uh, he needs to move on. One landing spot that I looked at is potentially the Knicks. The Knicks to me are a team who unfortunately has suffered from basically a constant rebuild for a long time.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, you know,
and I bash certain NFL owners, Jerry
yeah,
Jones,
right,
for being too involved and thinking he knows football. The
right.
same thing is with the Knicks.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
That's an owner problem. That's
it is.
not that they don't have people there that know basketball.
Right.
The owner believes he knows best. Just shut your mouth, write the checks.
Yep. You had Kristaps Porzingis, you had Phil
Yeah.
Jackson there for a while. Phil Jackson got a lot of criticism, but it was a lot the owner. I mean, really, and
Mhm.
and so perpetual rebuild. But I could see possibly, and maybe not, but a landing spot for Chris Paul could be the Knicks because they do need a leadership at that position. Chris Paul, he's getting older, but he could definitely teach the next generation of guard to be that guy. Um, so it's a possible landing spot. And there's some players, a first or second round pick. I mean, I don't know if is Chris Paul worth a first round pick and another player potentially. It just depends on salary cap considerations and what the teams are willing to do. But yeah, he's the same. He's the same. It's the same thing for me. Chris Paul is going to move on.
Right. All right. So my number 4, and he's also a leftover um, of at least a championship run for this team. He's an older player, but I think he still has value. And I think a team he would fit in well with a team like the Bucks or even like the Warriors. A team that needs one more piece and a veteran um, that isn't looking to be the star.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he I think he's made his money. He still had part of the problem is going to be his contract. You probably need to rework it. But that's Kevin Love of the Cavaliers.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
time for them to move on from him. He wants out. They don't want to be strapped with his contract. It is time to move him to a contender, um, because I believe that's what he wants. He wants to win another championship before he retires.
yeah. And I actually, I mean, I've seen that quite a bit. He wasn't on my list only because I had some other things that I wanted to address in my list, but I won't doubt it. I could see that happening. It just has to work for another team based on the contract that he has and how they would finagle that in terms of their salary cap and what have you. But I don't know. I've seen about 4 different landing spots for him, so
Right.
we'll see. But yeah, he's definitely a movable piece in the off season. My number 4 is with a team that's actually competitive and that's pretty good, but it hasn't quite worked out the way that they wanted it to. They built a core around these two players, and there's three camps. I think on this one, that's what I've seen. One player gets moved, the other player gets moved, or nobody gets moved. Personally, I think that a player does get moved, and that's in Philadelphia. So I think they're going to move a player. Some people have said Simmons, but I think it's Embiid that gets traded as opposed to Simmons. And I think he's going to end up in a place that would need another piece, either a Boston or a Portland or something like that, who would say, okay, we want another piece to put us at the level where we think, we're good, but can we win a championship the way we are right now? And then Philadelphia gets, some players from either one of those squads and some draft picks, and then they can build from there off those players and off those draft picks. Then they have Simmons, and then they get some other people in the door. So I think Philadelphia is going to be trading, and I could be wrong about that, but my feeling is it's Embiid, and they're going to make a move in the offseason.
Well, and here's the funny thing, because I agree
Yeah.
with you. Joel Embiid is my number three to
Okay.
be.
All right.
I just think it's one of those things where their chemistry just hasn't meshed together. Um, and I don't see it happening. Embiid has had injury issues.
Right.
Uh, he is a great talent.
Yep.
He has the ability to be one of the best in the league, but it's always just one after another. Why he's out and this and that. And the Sixers, I believe, are underperforming with their current roster.
Yeah.
Uh, by trading Embiid, you're gonna get a lot in return for him that can help your roster out. Um, but yeah, I think it's time he needs a change of scenery. And we talked about this before is that sometimes just changing what team you're on can elevate a player, and I think that's where Embiid is at. I
Yeah.
think the fans are getting kind of restless with him. I think he's getting restless with Philadelphia, and it's time to move on and get what you can for him. Let him start fresh over somewhere else. But yeah, he is my number three player that I'd like to see traded um, this coming
Yeah.
off.
And so there you go. I mean, yeah, I agree. I think that's I would, and I would say, I mean, if it ends up being a Boston, this is a possible trade that a couple people have mentioned. I just want to say, you were talking about Doc Rivers earlier, but Danny Ainge has been just, to me, phenomenal in
Mm-hmm.
Boston. And if he were to trade and do something with Embiid to get him there,
Holy
I
cow!
feel like he'd get the better end of the deal.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely.
So if that happened, I'd be all over that, and I think Boston would be in a great position. But my number three is Zach LaVine leaving Chicago and going to LA. The Lakers, they look at it, and I think you see they have two great players and they have some role players, but could they get another piece to complement Anthony Davis and LeBron? Because you want LeBron to stick it out for the remainder of his career, because he probably doesn't have that many years left. And Anthony Davis, you want to keep him there. And he probably will stick around, but if somebody tempts him, you never know if he might leave, especially if LeBron starts to decline a little bit. So
Right.
bring in another piece and keep that core solidified for a year or two to try and win another championship there.
Right. Yeah. 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 And that'd be big if the Lakers could. get Levine. He obviously wants out of Chicago.
Yeah.
Uh, he's made it pretty well known. So, it's not surprising.
Right.
Um, and the funny thing is, Zach Levine's my number 2.
Great
So,
segue. I love it. Yeah, that's
um,
great.
yeah, and I think the key here is because and we'll go over number 1, so I don't want to give too much away. But I think it's
Right.
really important for the Lakers to have forward thinking beyond LeBron, um,
Yes.
because if they can lock up Davis and Kuzma continues to develop, and you bring in a player like Levine, now as when LeBron is done, you're in clear cap space, and we text about this periodically. I know for a fact, as soon as it is possible, the Lakers are going after Zion.
Yes.
Zion made it publicly known before the draft that he wanted to play in LA. He wanted to be a Laker. There's even talk that the Lakers may trade up and try to get him at number 1.
Yeah. And once he's available to be there, I think he would be. But you have to establish a core. That's the thing about the
Right.
NBA, right? You got to have the players that work. So if you were to bring in a guy like that, then you have that core there, and you're around Anthony Davis, but you have solid players, and then you bring in a Zion, and then then you have a great roster,
Yeah.
right? A Levine and Anthony Davis, a Zion, a Kuzma. You've if he continues to develop, like you said, then you have a great roster. Post LeBron, then you're
Right.
really really good in the Western Conference. Yeah. Yep.
And hopefully, because I've been a Lakers fan back to the Kareem, Worthy, Magic days.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Hopefully, they have that forward thinking, unlike the Kobe era,
Right.
because I think they were so like in love with Kobe, and yeah, he was a great player. God rest his soul.
Right. Amazing.
But
Yep.
they didn't have the wherewithal to look past when he retired, because I think they thought he was going to play forever.
I almost thought, yeah, that I agree. They kind of just fell into this rut where they were like, okay, Shaq left, Kobe was there, and it got to the point where it's Kobe, and then you couldn't even name some of the players that were on their
Right.
roster.
Exactly. I mean, he played with some really poor guys,
Oh
like
yeah, oh yeah,
unreal. Like, how did they even make an NBA roster?
right. So that's your number 2. My number 2 is Aaron Gordon moving out of Orlando. I don't think that's really any surprise. I think that's been talked about with a lot of different places that I've seen. A possible landing spot for him would be the Suns. There's been some talk there, at least from what I've noticed, but I don't know that anybody has talked about it formally. But a lot of people have mentioned it. But I see Aaron Gordon moving out of Orlando, um, and maybe Phoenix is a destination for him. But that would be a possibility. Orlando wants to add some offense, and Aaron Gordon just hasn't worked out there. So to me, this was a move that could potentially happen in the offseason.
All right, and I'm going to preface this just because this is, remember, these are kind of like, we've been looking at stuff that realistically probably could happen,
Right.
but the technically top 5 is what we'd like to see happen.
Oh,
So,
right. Right.
from
Yep.
a fan perspective, and I know this is not ever going to happen, but from a fan perspective, I would love to see the Los Angeles Lakers trade LeBron James. I'd love to see it because here's the thing.
Okay. I like this. This is good. Yep,
We texted about this today.
we did.
You
Yeah,
said he has 2, maybe 3 years left.
yeah.
You can
Really, let's just be honest. Really, that's probably about it. Yeah,
so and really, what are you really getting out of him besides
right.
leadership on the floor?
Yeah. Well,
If
I mean,
you
he still scores. I mean, he's
well,
not horrible or something.
he's not horrible, but if you get Zach LaVine to pair up with Anthony Davis,
Yeah,
trade LeBron for something,
yeah,
another piece, a draft pick. Because I mean, remember the Lakers have really they have and they've always done this trade away their draft picks
yeah, yeah.
for players eventually, and that's what bit them within the end of
In
Kobe's
the Kobe
career,
era, right?
is that
Yep,
they didn't have those draft picks to fill in a roster and develop guys. They
right,
always thought we're the Lakers, everybody wants to play here.
right.
That wasn't the case. So I'm saying,
Wow. LeBron gets traded.
I'd love to see it. Like I said,
Oh,
it's not
right.
gonna happen. I would love to
No,
see it. I
it
would
would be
love to
awesome.
see it.
I won't disagree. I mean, it would be a crazy thing for the NBA, and it would be awesome, and it'd be so much headline
Oh
and
yeah.
and just everywhere. And maybe it would be a better thing for the Lakers if they actually did it from a basketball standpoint. Now, okay, I know people are going to listen to this and they're going to freak out and they're going to be like, "Oh my god, it's LeBron. You can't do that." But from
This
a building perspective to the future,
this
maybe that would
isn't
be a thing,
LeBron from his prime.
Yeah. Yeah, he's LeBron on the decline, Yeah.
It's like, yeah, he's still good, but he is not the MVP best player in the world.
Right. Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you just look at it. Would you right now, if you had to decide if you're the Lakers, we're going to keep 80 or LeBron, who are you going to pick?
Yeah, you have to pick between the
You
two
have to pick
right
one.
now.
Who are you
Put
going
a
to
gun
pick?
to your head, Lakers brass. Who do you choose? Yeah.
Guess what? I'm taking Anthony Davis. He's
Right.
younger.
He's got more connected eyebrows.
Right. Well, that too. Steph Curry or LeBron James right now?
Right.
Steph Curry.
Yeah, it's tough, but yeah, I mean,
James Giannis. You're taking Giannis.
right, right,
Yes, he is still one of the better players in the league, but he is not
right,
elite anymore. He is a guy that is because you have an Anthony Davis, he's going to still score points. You saw LeBron, the true LeBron last year without Anthony Davis, when it was just
right.
him.
It is just LeBron. Yep, yep.
He's a good, not great player. Because if that was still the LeBron of prime, the
Right.
Lakers would have still been one of the better teams in the Western Conference. He did it
Just
in
like he was
Cleveland.
when he was in Cleveland.
Right.
Yeah,
He can't do that anymore. He can't do it by
yeah.
himself
He can't
anymore.
will a team to do it on his
Right.
own. And so I mean,
And-
to be
right.
fair, so we're not knocking the guy and saying he's
Right.
trash. I mean,
Right.
guys,
Right.
don't listen to this show and be like, "Oh my God, these guys hate LeBron." No, 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 no,
No,
no.
I'm a Lakers fan.
Right, right.
If the Bucks don't win the championship, I hope the Lakers do. But
Right.
I'm just realistic.
Yeah.
What I don't want to see is LeBron playing out like Kobe did, where he's hurt
Yeah.
all the time and things
Right.
like that.
He's lost a
That's
step.
like
He's constantly injured. Yeah.
yeah. So that, like I said, I think, and like you said, the headlines, the buzz that it would create around the NBA for the
Oh
NBA,
yeah. Oh
and
yeah.
then not LeBron going to the Lakers, but the Lakers actually trading a Hall of Famer. I don't think
Crazy.
they've ever done that.
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I really don't think so. It would be amazing if that were to be the case. And you know what? Maybe he'd end up on a team that would still work out for him well, and the Lakers would be in a good position too. I don't know. It's possible.
I'll tell you
So
right now, if the Bucks called the Lakers and said, "We'll give you Giannis, we want LeBron James and AD," the Lakers might pull that deal. They
plus some
might,
draft picks and other considerations too.
right?
But
You
yeah,
know, they may say, "Okay,"
yeah,
you know that's why I'm just saying I'd like to see it happen. LeBron
yeah,
is the current LeBron is
right,
good, not great,
right. As of this year, people,
as
as of
of this
this year,
year.
yeah, right.
So that's my number
Well,
one.
I'll tell you, you went for the exciting. Mine is a little bit more boring than yours as a number one. And I think it's just because I was looking at it from a perspective of a team I like, that I wanted to see get better and potentially compete in the Western Conference. And that was the aforementioned Mavericks that we talked about earlier. They have, you know, they have offense up the yin yang. They've got some great players, but if they could add a defensive piece like a Rudy Gobert from Utah, the defensive player of the year, they could potentially be the team to beat in the Western Conference
Mhm.
with, like we were kind of talking about, they're the unsung guys. They're not the flashy. This isn't the Lakers, this is the Dallas Mavericks. Maybe it could be possible that they could be that one or two team in the Western Conference. I thought about that. I looked at that and I said, you know what? That's what I like. That's what I would look for. Let them make a move and bring somebody in. Uh, and they've got plenty of other players that they could trade away, that would work, or draft picks to bring in another piece. So that was my number one, was to bring in a defensive specialist like that for Dallas, to give them that added piece to get over the hump and be that championship level team. So
All right. So there you have it. Those are our top five trades we would like to see this coming up off season. We have one more thing that we're going to discuss. And this is something that you brought up, Lone Wolf.
it
And
is. Yep.
so I'm going to let you start because this is
Sure.
what you wanted to bring up. We're going to choose one team from the NBA that did not make the playoffs that we would like to be general manager of. That is what I did read that right, correct? That's
That
what
is
we're
correct. Yeah. My
doing?
question was, if you're a
All right.
GM and you have to pick a non-playoff team and you're going into next year, who do you want, to be the GM of, and why do you want to be the GM of that team going into the next season? You did read that correctly, Coach.
All
That is
right.
right. That's what I wanted to
I
do.
just wanted to make sure because I have a team and I would just want to make sure
Okay.
that I
You
was
got it
right.
right. Yeah. Well, so I will start. Yeah, this is my team, and I think they're positioned well, from a couple different standpoints, from a salary cap standpoint, from a young talent standpoint, and from a conference standpoint. If it's a team in the Western Conference as opposed to the Eastern Conference, I think that definitely makes a difference. My team is in the Eastern Conference, and my team is the Atlanta Hawks.
Hmm.
Um, I like the Hawks because they've got some really nice young talent in Trey Young, and John Collins, and they have a boatload of cap space.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean they could make some moves in terms of trades or things like that, but I've seen numbers around 42 to 49 million. Honestly, I'm not a cap guy. I don't know what the actual final figure is, but they have a lot of money. All right, so they've got a lot of cap space. they can afford to bring in a free agent or two in order to kind of bolster or build this roster. And my feeling is they are not going to do that on a flashy free agent. I could be wrong, but if I were the GM, I would not take a max contract kind of free agent to bring them in. I would bring in maybe two pieces that are some really good pieces to complement what I've got. Maybe a Joe Harris from the Nets kind of thing, or an Evan Fournier from the Magic. They need some shooters. They need some other players to kind of complement what they've got. And they drafted. They're really young. They're really raw. Don't get me wrong. They got DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish in the draft last year. They're raw. But this is the team that I would want because I'd be excited about the young core that we have and the money that we have to spend, and I want to do it judiciously and not be crazy about it. So that was my team, and they're in the Eastern Conference. So look, the top team in their division, I think, was the Miami Heat. They could be a contender in that division, no problem. Orlando and Miami, I think, are in their division. They could be a contender in that division, no problem. We could build the Atlanta Hawks, me the GM, we could build a contender there. So I feel good about them. That's my team.
So I just one question for you
Sure.
on what you promised me. So you said you would not take a max player.
Yeah. Yep.
So if you got a call from the agent of Giannis saying, I want to play in Atlanta, you would not
You're
take.
putting me on the spot.
Yes,
You're
I
putting me on
am,
the spot.
because you said you
Okay.
would not take a max player.
Okay. And so here's what I'll say to you, Coach. I was thinking about like a Gordon Hayward or an Anthony Davis. Now, if it were Giannis, I might reconsider that, and I might take a Giannis because you see, you do this stuff. I might take Giannis because he's young, he's hungry, and he's really, really good. And to me, Giannis is a better player than a Gordon Hayward or an Anthony Davis. Yes, I did say that. Giannis is a better player.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
probably would take him over those guys if you're going to give a max contract to anybody. Outside of that, I probably wouldn't. But if it were Giannis, yeah, I'd probably give him a max contract.
All right. I just wanted to, I
Yep,
knew.
you put me on the spot. That's all good. I can. Hey, and here you go. I'm not sorry. I changed my opinion, and it's okay.
Don't apologize for changing your mind.
Right, I changed my mind.
Never apologize because you change your mind.
I mean,
Um,
really, I was just thinking along the lines that Trae Young or John Collins or one of those guys was going to become that, and that's really why I was thinking I wouldn't do a max contract, but if presented with that scenario, then I might. But that's why I was really thinking like, hey, Trae Young, he could be that star, so I don't have to give somebody a max contract because in a couple of years, when he's a stud, a complete stud in the NBA, I'm going to have to be paying him. You know what I mean?
right. All right. So comes up to me.
Yes.
So, it, and I went, I could have taken the easy way out. I could have said, well, I'll take the Golden State Warriors.
Sure.
I was like, you know what? You got to disqualify them because they are not a bad team. I know they didn't make the playoffs, so it fits the criteria. But I knew it. I knew what you were getting at. You wanted
Yeah. Yeah.
a team that hasn't been good, that you'd be excited to take over. So the team that I would want, really, I think they overperformed this year. I think there is potential there. They have a couple of assets that they could trade and get some picks for. There's a rumor about one of these players already being traded, which I would definitely try to shop that deal. This team has been bad for a long time.
Okay.
And I like how young the roster is, and that they're in the Western Conference, so that does hurt.
Sure.
But here's the thing with the Western Conference: it ebbs and flows. It's never really there's not a 10-year period where there's always the same teams. It kind of ebbs and flows throughout. So if you can get the right group of people in there, you can be competitive. And that my team that I would be excited to take over is the Phoenix Suns.
Oh yeah. Okay.
They don't have they're technically over the cap, but they got a couple people that are club options, and I don't know if they'd pick them up. Like Frank Kaminsky, he's 5,000 or 5 million on the cap figure. I don't know if they'll pick that option up.
Our guy from Wisconsin.
Our guy from Wisconsin. Now
Yep.
they do have Ricky Rubio, who is
Right.
he's 29. He's the oldest player on that roster. They have nobody over the age of 30 on their roster.
Right.
There's a super young roster. They weren't that far off the playoffs this
No, they
year.
weren't. Yep.
In the
Very
Western
intriguing team. Yeah.
Conference, I would possibly look at maybe moving Rubio to a contender, trying to get something back for him. Devin Booker, who is a max contract guy. There's rumors out there that Philadelphia might be interested in him. They have multiple first round draft picks and a ton of capital that they could trade. I would be pushing that hard because if I can get a couple of draft picks for him, clear out the cap space, I'm sitting pretty now and building a really young core that as the Lakers, the Warriors, and those other teams are aging and transitioning, my guys are coming into their prime. So I'm not looking in the next 2-3 years. I'm looking 3-4 years down the road with this
Yeah,
team.
and you've got Oubre Jr. and DeAndre
Mhm.
Ayton. You've got some pieces there
Yeah,
to work with. Yeah.
I mean, you look at it, they have, and that they won't be rookies next year, but on the roster this year, they had 4 rookies.
Yeah.
So you have a ton of time to develop these guys. And their coach is a pretty good coach. Monty Williams, he's a pretty good coach. I
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
him. And this is just one of those. They're an intriguing team that like I said, I think they overperformed this year. But you know what? That's all it takes is to get a group of guys some confidence that hey, we can do this.
Mhm.
We can do this. Um, you know, unfortunately, you got a guy like Devin Booker who's a great player,
Yeah.
but he's kind of on that. I don't think really fits well in with the core that they're trying to develop there. And he's one of those guys that needs a change of pace. He needs a
Yeah.
new home to start fresh, and find somebody that's willing to give you either some young prospects or some draft picks. Give him an opportunity, give you some assets, free up some cap space. We're sitting pretty, and we're going back to the Barkley era where we're in the NBA finals.
The Charles Barkley era. Hey, I will say this. I like that pick too because the Suns were one of those that I said had a possibility at making the playoffs in this format, and I liked them. I think you're right. They probably did overperform a little bit, but the roster gelled and the coaching was good. Um, so yeah, I agree with that. I like them as a squad moving forward, and I like them even better if they do affect that trade that you're talking about, because I think they could really build around a core when some other teams in the Western Conference um, maybe are on the decline, and there's quite a few that could be, you know,
Mm-hmm.
depending on how things play out. If they don't do if they don't make the moves that they should, they could be on the decline. So, yeah, I like the Suns as a possibility and a playoff team, um, depending on what happens in the future. But that's a good pick. I like that too. So,
So there you have it, everybody. Lone Wolf likes the Hawks. I like the Suns. Um, Neither team has been very good lately.
no,
It's been a long time since I can remember the Suns being relevant.
yeah,
Um, I know the Hawks had a couple of decent years under the Bucks coach, wasn't it? He is the
yeah.
last coach there to get the. I think they made it all the way to the conference finals, didn't they? Or was it the?
I maybe the second round, but that they definitely had some good years. Fairly recently, they won 40 plus games, 45, 46 games, something like that. But they were good. Yeah, they weren't bad at all. Yeah, for sure. They had some relevance.
So, but nothing like the 80s. Um, where they were one of the top teams in the league. And then in the '90s for the Suns, if it wasn't for the Bulls, um, the Suns probably would have won at least one title.
Yeah, they probably would have. Yeah,
I mean, they
yeah,
had those years with Barkley in there were were pretty impressive. It was.
yeah,
I remember watching those finals. Those are some fun finals to watch. Um, and then you had the Jazz in there too. So, for what the Suns were able to do, during that era was kind of fun to watch. It's just you always look at these clubs that struggle, and fans are fans, but when you're just a sports fan, you look at them and you just hope you at least get a couple of years where teams are relevant.
right,
Um, you know, um, even in the NFL, I never like to see a team, even if I don't really not a fan of the club, to see them stink for long periods of time. I like to at
right.
least see
Like the
them be
Browns,
relevant. Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah. It's just or the Lions or something. You feel bad for those teams. And I was just looking back at the Hawks. They were good. They were the first in their conference in 2014-15. They won 48 games in 2015 and 16. So they haven't been horrible for a long time. Um, but I mean, it's been a few years now since they had a winning record. 3 in a row they've had losing records. So they're in a clear rebuilding mode to get back. But yeah, you do want teams to just feel like they have some relevance, even if it's just for the fans. Just have a winning season once in a while.
Right.
You just feel
Exactly.
bad for them. Yeah.
And that's I don't really feel bad for like the owners,
No,
because
not at
like
all. Yeah.
you hire the people that run the club. So if the club stinks, that's on you guys. An owner, you can, don't get involved in the roster, but you have control who your GM is, who your
Yep.
president of operations is. They
Right.
decide who the coach is. So you control that part.
Right.
I feel bad for the fans and the city.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they're in because, like the Suns, they just, I mean, I feel bad for Phoenix.
Yeah.
Since Steve Nash left, they have been just brutal. Um, you know, and then you look at just sort of Golden State was the same way until they got Steph Curry. You know,
Right.
they were just so bad.
Yeah,
And
they had not been good for a long time. Yeah. Yep.
yeah,
It
and
was
you
like
look at
what, the Chris Mullen era or
yeah,
something? I mean,
the,
yeah, I
the
mean, it's been a long time.
and like the Knicks. I mean, they haven't been good since the Patrick Ewing days. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's been really horrible. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of New York, but I feel bad for their fans because it's like you're talking 20 years of just
Right.
being bad.
Well,
Uh,
and the Suns, here's the thing. The Suns, I'm looking these things up as we're talking about them. The Suns have not had a winning season since the 2013-14 NBA
ooh,
season.
almost a decade.
Yeah, and then the two seasons before that they had losing seasons. So they had one good season and then bad seasons since 2011-12.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that's just
mean,
horrible.
yeah.
Oh
I
wait,
don't.
sorry, they had a losing season the year before that too. So
I mean, you eventually you feel bad. It was like the
yeah.
Nuggets too for a long time were bad, and but we lived through it too. The Bucks were bad for how
Oh, for
long? We
years.
had a couple
Yeah.
of years
Yeah.
where we got beaten the conference finals by the 76ers, and then
Right.
we were back down to being crappy until we got Giannis.
Right.
So, and maybe that is why we feel bad for these teams because we've been through it.
We've been there. We've been there. We've experienced it. We know. And yeah, you want teams to go through a rebuilding period and become good again. Obviously, if teams could, and it's just not realistic for teams to be dynastic, right? I mean, you look at the Patriots or something and you say, oh my God, this went on forever. It's just not realistic for most teams to do that. So you just want your team to be competitive as much as possible. Um, and not to just not to stink, and not to be out of the playoffs for so long.
Well, right,
Like
yeah,
there are some franchises that have just been out of the playoffs for so long. You just look at them and you're like, oh, sorry, that's horrible.
well, I mean,
Yeah,
we went through it with the Packers. I mean,
we
you
did.
when you get to the point where you're excited that your team wins goes 6-10,
Yeah.
your
Oh
team's bad.
yeah.
Your
Yeah.
team's bad when you say a 6-10 season is good.
Right.
Um, so yeah, you want your team to be competitive, not always winning, not make it. You'd like to make the playoffs every year, but
Right.
just be in the hunt.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's why it frustrates me with when it's clearly an ownership problem.
Yeah.
When you look at the NBA, there's only really one, and that is the Knicks.
Yeah.
There's no reason the Knicks should be this bad,
No, for this long. No.
but the owner is an absolute moron. Thinks he knows how to build a roster, and he doesn't. And I'm not saying I know how to build a basketball roster because I don't. I don't. I can look at cap numbers and how to kind of the moves I'd make to make it financially work, but I'm not great at looking at basketball talent and being like, hey, this guy's really good, sign him. So I would never sit there and say, oh, we should sign this guy or this guy or this guy. But
Right.
that's what the Knicks owner's doing. It's same thing in Washington. Dan Schneider, he thinks he knows how to put a football roster together. He doesn't. You know, for a long time, Al Davis did, but then the NFL changed, and he didn't change with it. That's why the Raiders weren't good.
Yeah.
So you feel bad when especially for fans when it's clearly an owner just getting in the
Right.
way of
Because
a
there's
franchise.
nothing you can do. I mean, you can't get rid of the owners.
Exactly.
There's nothing you can do about it. Yeah.
Right. We dealt with and I'm going to throw them under the bus. The Sea Leagues with the
Yeah.
Brewers,
Yeah.
they were making money because their team was so bad.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't spending any of the money on the roster. They get new owners, and all of a sudden they're at least competitive year in and year out.
Right.
They're not one of the bottom feeders in the league anymore. You
No,
know,
not at all. No. And they're not winning the World Series every year or anything like that, but every year you look at it, you say, you know what? I'm interested in what's going on with the Brewers because they're going to be competitive. They're going to be in it. They have a chance every year.
right? Yeah, and so again in the NBA, I can't think of another owner that's really getting in their club's way. Um,
Right.
I think in the NBA you have a lot of owners that are trying to make their teams better. And
Mm-hmm.
the one thing about the NBA is this, it's all even more so than NFL. I think when you hit on getting that right group of guys together,
Yeah.
your team can become good really fast.
Right.
Because one player can impact the change in a club, unlike the
It can make a
NFL,
huge difference. Yeah. Yeah.
where it's like, yeah, a quarterback could, but
Sure.
you still have to have guys around him. You know,
Well, and you have to
you
have a defense. I mean, you got 22 distinct players, whereas basketball, you're playing both sides. So you got five, and you bring
right.
in one guy out of those five, it makes a huge impact. Whereas, yeah, football, well, I mean, the quarterback comes in, but that guy doesn't play defense. So if your defense stinks, it's different.
Well, yeah. I was gonna say you take like Aaron Rodgers, put him on Jacksonville.
Yeah,
Jacksonville's still gonna be bad.
sure.
That
Right.
they may like get close to 500, but they're not winning a Super Bowl just because you
No,
brought in Rodgers.
right.
They have too many holes on that roster to win a championship.
Yeah.
Now you look at the Lakers. You bring in. I'm not even gonna say LeBron James because they brought in LeBron James and they still stunk.
Yeah.
You bring in Anthony Davis,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden now you're the best team in the conference. One
Right.
player can change the dynamic of a club in the
Right.
NBA. So,
I will say this: when they did bring in LeBron, they became at least competitive again. Before that, they were just
right,
awful.
yeah, yeah, I
So
mean they were absolutely
yeah,
horrible.
but yeah, I mean, to your point, it's one player. You bring in another player, and all of a sudden, look at them. They're the best team in the Western
Right.
Conference. It's crazy. Yeah.
So, and that's the thing. It's like any, a trade can totally shift the league in the NBA. Unlike the NFL, where you see trades and you just don't see like top players getting traded in the NFL like you do other leagues.
Yeah.
And there's reasons for that thing, and things like that. But that's why I think what makes the NBA intriguing because
Mm-hmm.
even though the NFL has free agency and there's a lot of player movement, there's not a lot of star movement. In the
Yeah.
NBA, stars in the league change teams.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think
And it
that,
used to not be that way, but it's definitely changed to that. That's the dynamic in the
yeah,
NBA now, for
well,
sure.
and LeBron made that happen. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
before LeBron left Cleveland, it wasn't like that. Shaq kind of started to break the mold.
Right, leaving Orlando. Yeah, yep,
Going to LA, then leaving LA, and going to Miami. But LeBron really blew the mold wide open.
yeah,
And so and that's where, people can say, oh, greatness of each player. You can debate on the court stuff all you want. It's
hmm
apples and oranges. Players are players. LeBron, I think, Jordan took the NBA and made it from basketball to entertainment and sport.
right, right,
LeBron took it to that even higher level where he made the NBA intriguing year round
yeah,
because there's
yeah,
the player movement.
right, because of all the movement that could potentially happen, and that's what you see now in the NBA is the stars often realign um, to see, okay, what's the most balance? Who can we bring in? Is there a guy
Mhm.
that we can bring in who's a star to bring in more fans to make ourselves competitive again? Because that one player can make that much of a difference.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You just look like last year. Kawhi Leonard leaves the
yeah,
world champions.
right. What more compelling storyline could you have than that? A guy who has barely been in Toronto wins a title and then leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So, that's what makes the NBA so intriguing
yeah,
now than it did in the past, is that your rosters, even next year, are going to be so different across the league. And maybe not with the top tier teams, but all those teams that are fighting to get up to that top level, there are going to be
mm-hmm.
so many changes. Um,
Right.
Even with good teams, like we talked about, the Sixers are probably going to make moves. You
Yep.
know, Boston, Danny Ainge doesn't just sit on his roster. If
No, he
he can
doesn't.
get if he can get like an Embiid or somebody that's going to take that roster to the next level, he's going to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's what makes the NBA so intriguing. It, and I don't hide it. I'm not a huge NBA fan, but I like the watching. I like the free agency stuff. I like the to watch all that stuff because I think that's intriguing to me.
Right.
Um, Not necessarily actually watching basketball. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And I mean, I love basketball. I mean, I'm a more of a college basketball fan, but that's just mostly the March Madness kind of stuff. I love watching that. But since we were deprived of that, the
right,
NBA, unfortunately, the NBA season has taken on a new meaning, and what's going on now. Um, it's very intriguing to me. But the moves are even more so because I just want to see who's going to make the move to be that next team. There's really no, the Golden State Warriors had their run, right? And there is no dominant team in basketball right now that I would say hands down. You look at the Warriors when they're at their absolute peak, they were the best, or the Bulls when they're at their best, or whoever. But there is no team this year that I would say the Lakers are good, the Bucks are good. There's nobody dominant. Who's going to
no,
be that next team? There's an opening right now, I think, to
yeah,
make that be possible.
yeah, and I think the NBA, if they can go 4 or 5 years without a team that's that dominant, I think that you're going to pick up a lot of fans that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, we talk about this. We haven't for a while, but I just think the stuff going on outside of the sport itself um, has hurt leagues on
Yeah.
some decisions that they've made. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm not saying their decisions are right or wrong. I'm just from reading and talking with people. People are just turned off by those things because they want to use sport as a get away from reality and not continue to live it.
Right.
So I think if they can have that competitiveness where every team has a chance going into the season, they're going to pick up fans. So I think in the back of their mind, the league is saying, we hope the Warriors don't come back and be this unstoppable force like they were,
Right. Yeah.
before this year.
Yeah, they
Because
don't want that, I mean,
yeah,
as a league, and obviously they can't do anything about it and they won't do anything about it, but they don't want that as a league. They want to see the competitiveness. They want to see another team rise. They want to see a different champion, that sort of thing.
right, exactly. And I really think that they want to continue to see, like the Torontos. I'm sure they'd love to see a small market team like the Bucks win a championship.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
that brings in a whole nother market of fan into the
Right.
league.
Right.
Um,
And
and,
casual fans buying merchandise and all sorts of
yep,
things. Yeah. Yep.
and I'm sure a lot of small market teams are going to be watching what Giannis does,
Yeah.
because if he decides to stay in Milwaukee, that again changes the dynamic because now it says small market teams can keep their stars,
Right. Right.
unlike the precedents that LeBron set, where they don't have a chance opportunity to keep their guys. Once
Yeah.
they're free to go, they're gone. So it's going to be very intriguing once all that stuff happens.
Yep.
Uh, you know, we'll talk about Giannis when it comes closer to talking about that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I agree. Yeah, we'll get into that free agency piece. Once we get to that off season, I don't think that starts until October. I think that's what they said from what I saw. But yeah, I mean, we'll definitely get into that and go over it and talk about what the impact is there and what moves are going to be made. So
so, all right. Well, we went way over on time tonight, Long Wolf,
we did, yes, we
but good conversations. Not very often that we spend this much time on something besides the NFL.
right.
So,
That's
um,
good for all those basketball fans out there. Drink it up. It's a
that's
good it
right.
was a
Drink
good
it
show
up
on the
because
NBA. Yeah,
this is kind of the NBA's time right now, and that
right.
and the NHL, it's their playoffs.
Yep.
So, if you can take any time away from the NFL, more power to you. So,
Right.
again, thank you everybody that listens. Um,
Or listens to the show later on
yep,
YouTube, Facebook, wherever, Podbean. Yep.
yep. Be smart, be safe, and we'll talk to everybody next week.
Have a good night.